Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you at this conference, which is a classic event for us and a new success. So I want to congratulate today's organizers for their work. I am here in this panel with my colleagues to analyze the current issue, which is a concern for technical farmers in general and which should be included in the national agenda. The political agricultural agenda. I believe this topic has an impact on our production, on our farming activity, and in the future of our operations, and it is weed management. Personally, I believe researchers somehow, for a long time, have been alerted of this possibility to occur when we started using massively certain active ingredients, a generalized use of them to control a wide range of species which we do not desire in our fields, the weeds. We were thus simplifying decision-making process, management, not only from the technical perspective, but also from the commercial one. And as everything, the easy things last short, and we started seeing complications soon. We have seen this type of issues for several years. Under some circumstances, the impact is dramatic. Other scenarios offer certain control to these weeds. As farmers, businessmen, technicians, we should tackle this issue from a wide perspective, meaning as businessmen, as farmers, both livestock and agricultural products, as technicians and as advisors. I do believe this will not be cheaply resolved if we keep on insisting on monoculture, working with a reduced choice. As a farmer, I have explored for a long time new options to find a way out, a reasonable solution from the technical and economic point of view. The results are enthusiastic. We can diversify crops. We can diversify the use of active ingredients from herbicides, and we can also resort to cover crops to manage the time window known as stubble or fallow to compete against undesired species, that is, the weeds, that would offer us some alternatives for them to stop thriving, their reproductive organs, rhizomas, or seeds, to be kept at the minimum level so that growing is kept at the minimum level, weakened. This is my general point of view. Today I'm accompanied by two experts from our country and from abroad who will give a new perspective to have some more elements at hand to make decisions as farmers. I will give the floor to the next speaker. The first speaker is Fabián Menalled, professor of ecology and weed management in Montana, United States. He's Argentinian. He studied and worked in the leading universities in the United States, Iowa, Michigan, and Massachusetts. I will give him the floor to start with his talk. I would like to thank Aapresid for the invitation to be part of this conference. I was thinking of the fact that today it's the 26 years ago, like that today, my wife and I left this country. So I'm a bit moved to be here today and share with you the research work we are carrying out at the University in Montana for weed management and ecology. When I was invited, they asked me a question, which was like a simple question. It was, which practices besides chemical approaches are available for weed management? I want to focus not only on practices, but also on the framework within which these practices are implemented. I believe that framework is an ecological evolutive framework. Why should we adopt practices? Why should we change the framework? Yesterday, there were several talks related to herbicide resistance, and that's the main issue for farmers. But when I talk in Montana, I like telling farmers that herbicide resistance is from the past. The problem we face today, or the problem for the future, is multiple resistance to herbicides. When we have biotypes that can resist more than one mode of action. This slide shows the temporal distribution of weeds biotypes which are resistant to 2, 4, 5, even 11 sites of actions of herbicides. When you face these weeds, you are almost lost in terms of chemical tools. And this has happened to us in Montana. And I will share this with you today. A simple question. Why are there herbicide-resistant weeds? Because we are abusing herbicides. We are executing a pressure on selection. But we should take the ecological evaluative perspective. When the pressure is highly selective and it is applied repeatedly, progress occurs very fast, affecting ecology, which poses the system within a new evolution framework. When I talk about evolution, I'm referring to Darwin's theory, selection theory. Darwin in 1833 was here in Buenos Aires, and he visited the area. He was here in Rosario, then went to Uruguay and went back on board to travel around the world. And in the province of Buenos Aires and the province of Santa Fe is where he started developing his natural theory, natural evolution theory. He started thinking about it here. Evolution is something that we relate to too many years, but evolution also takes place very fast. And those of us who are more than 50 we know that if we have a fever, you will be given an antibiotic. When we have fever, doctors will tell us, have a broth and come back tomorrow, because doctors are not so willing to prescribe antibiotics because of the resistance. It may happen within days. That fast evolution process also is reflected in our soil when we intensively use herbicides and we select weeds which are herbicide resistant. We are changing the ecology of the system, and we place ourselves under a new system which forces us to resort to new tools. When tools are too expensive or we have no more tools, plugging comes into action again, and evolution pressure will take place again. The blue line in this slide shows the production of weeds which has not been plugged, and it emerges again. When there's a constant pressure, there's a late emergence to escape to the selective treatment. In Argentina, we have serious problems of herbicide-resistant weeds. Black oat is the one I will talk about today. It is a problem here and a problem where I work in Montana. It is resistant to the ACS inhibitors. In 2010, you can see there, this has already been distributed widely in the province of Buenos Aires. In Montana, to give you an idea, we are on the north, near the border with Canada. Our story is a bit worse. The first resistance was found in 1990, multiple resistance in 1996, ALS resistance, ACCS resistance in 2002 and 2006, and then within those type of weeds, we thought we could control everything because the weeds have never been against this selective pressure. However, there was resistance. We collected the weeds and we saw multiple resistance. We used about 15 herbicides and could not manage them with any of them. Basically, there were 5 modes of action. Currently, these weeds offer resistance to all the products that farmers can use during the crop. Our system in Montana is very simple: wheat, stubble, and then our system is very similar to the one Bill Captaptree mentioned because of the rain. There's a high selection pressure, not many tools for crop rotation. What we did first was trying to identify the physiological genetic mechanism that was causing that resistance. ALS or ACCS resistance, there's a particular mutation. There was no particular mutation here. P450 gene was expressed here and was induced in those multiple resistance species. So we suspect, we are still working on this, that the incremented metabolism takes place. Basically the same process by which wheat is not affected by herbicides. These are resistant to all the herbicides we are using and probably to those that will be launched in the market. Therefore, we have no possibility of using residual herbicides, no new herbicides, one of the worst scenarios we can think of. And we wondered what practices, apart from chemical approaches, could farmers use against the black oat. We had to modify the system ecology to minimize the evolution pressure. We worked on several aspects trying to minimize evolution pressure, but I will show you today some of the papers where we try to maximize the competitive capacity of crops. We worked with pathogens, among others, but I will refer to one particular paper.
This is a no-till field, and we have tried to change plant-to-weed ratio. We work with two variables. One is an environmental variable, fertilization. We use different levels of fertilization, very low to just above what farmers normally apply. And then planting density, we take it to twice as dense as farmers usually seed. So we sampled the soil to know how much nitrogen to add. Then in 2 times 2 meters areas, we added black oat. It is a susceptible biotype or resistant 3 or resistant 4. Multiple resistant 3 or 4. That is how I'm going to mention them. We put them in small plots, a susceptible biotype or one of the 2 susceptible biotypes. We also wanted to check the decomposition of seeds in the seed bench, so we use these bags that humidity can pass through. We checked after some time how many seeds continued to be viable. In Montana, the problem is early snow. We did this for 3 years. Some years conditions were favorable, others were not. We had to shovel out the snow. The next spring, which for us is the month of May, we marked black oat seeds. We applied herbicide just to simulate what any farmer would do. The resistant seeds continued to be there. We followed up the populations through summer until we had the production of seeds. We also consider insects or rodents. And we took that as a value that we introduced in our calculations. We also took data from the dependency upon density. These are the results. As to seed survival, the susceptible biotype, that is the blue column, less survival than the other resistant biotypes, R1 and R3, which was a concern. The ecological theory says that when one organism has enough energy to survive or to reproduce, that is what he uses energy for, survive or reproduce. So the multiple resistant species should adapt less to the system and should die sooner. That did not happen. We assess germination, and the resistant species did not pay any ecological cost for developing the resistance. As to emergency, there was no big difference among the biotypes. But the seed production at the end of the summer was interesting. This is the number of seeds per square meter. It goes from 0 to 12,000 in the different biotypes. The susceptible in blue, no seeds at all, because we could control that with herbicides. The resistant biotypes produce quite many seeds, between 8 to 12,000, but in low density, as we increase nitrogen, less seeds were produced. The same pattern was seen when we increased seed density. but the effect was larger. The important thing was that we have started with a seed bench of 1,000 per square meter, and in most scenarios there was a higher production of seeds. This study continued for 3 years in 4 different sites, so you see the variability. Some years were better, some years were worse, some years production was higher or others were lower. 2015 was year number 3. So what do we have? We have values of the different stages of the weed population, how many emerge, how long they last, how many die, how many survive. And we can rebuild the weed populations now based on field data. These are the equations we used to build the oat, the black oat population, and see how many seeds could go to the seed bank. This is a populational dynamics model. We have 3 years, 4 repetitions, and we ask the model to random choose something, high nitrogen, low nitrogen, choose an early stage, and then transfer that randomly to a different year. And we did that for 20 years. We ran the model 500 times. So we have the mean and we have the variance with the probability of having certain scenario and certain mathematical models. Let us say, what if we have 5% more survival? How will the model behave? And we can analyze different scenarios. My PhD student, who is finishing right now, introduced this graph. So this is the first time I show this graph. And what you can see is the result of one of the models. This is wheat stubble. We started with a seed population in the bench, 1,000 per square meter, and susceptible populations are in yellow. That disappeared in 2 or 3 years. The resistant could not be controlled with low planting density, low nitrogen, and this shape was because every year we had stubble, there was a population explosion of seeds, because this was density dependent. The interesting thing was what happened when we increased the nitrogen level. You see that with a low density, we go to your right, we see that populations, the resistant populations, drop in number until we get to the last one, where resistant population number 4 collapsed as quickly as the susceptible, and resistant number 3 still stayed but at lower levels. When we run the model at high density numbers, results were similar. High density, low nitrogen. One population went above the first value, the other got stable between 250 and 450 seeds per square meter. The interesting thing is that now that the crop was more competitive, as we increased nitrogen, populations collapsed more quickly. Therefore, we can give farmers 2 management scenarios. He can decide, depending on price and financial decisions or other type of decisions, he can go to low planting density with a lot of nitrogen on the soil, or he can use less nitrogen and increase planting density. The other scenario is, if it is a very big concern, try to have the more competitive crop, high density, high nitrogen. I think this graph reflects the photograph, what I meant. If we want to manage weeds only with herbicides, this is what's going to happen because evolution is fast and more efficient. So somehow we have to change our mindset and revisit our ideas. Now, what is the problem with these models? These models are assuming that weather will be kind of constant, and we know that we are under global climate change, where we have more CO2, which leads or which creates great challenges. So we are starting to check how we can manage weeds when we have a new environmental context in the planet. But what I mean here is that we have to try to use our best tool, which is in between our two ears, that is our brain, and find tools to manage weeds. Now, let me thank again Aapresid for the invitation. Thank you.
Le agradecemos a Fabián Menalled por su disertación y vamos a presentar ahora a Tomás Baigorria. Él es ingeniero agrónomo de la Universidad Nacional de Río Cuarto, trabaja en el INTA, en la estación experimental.
This is Cristian Carzola. He works at INTA Marco Juárez in the province of Córdoba. He's doing his PhD in the University of Rosario, assessing cover crops in the water dynamics and weed dynamics. Tomás Baigorria, that is his name. Good morning. I thank you for the invitation. The name of my presentation is quite long. Check the word sustainability there because we've talked about that many times. The problem is to apply it. Sustainability is in many papers, but then it is very difficult to do it. This is the group, the team that works with me, Cristian Alvarez. They are not from INTA Marco Juárez, Cristian Carzola, but they are part of the team nevertheless. Different issues. This is water in Marco Juárez, the peri-urban areas. Check this dry plot. What is the integrated management here? Nothing, absolutely nothing. And something that is interested to increase water efficiency. That was mentioned before today too. Though we have shortage of water, we have 75 liters of water per glass of beer. Another concern. We have several concerns, not only weeds, but weeds is what have summoned us here. And everything has a cost. A cost to the system, a production cost, a cost because you reduce, you have a reduced yield. So why cover crops? We can touch on different aspects, not only weed control. If we do cover crops just to control weeds, maybe we don't do cover crops. Cover crops have other functions and work on different facets. It reduces the water layers, it fixates nitrogen, we can capture atmospheric nitrogen, it controls erosion, it can control weeds, it can control mobile nutrients. This is a good rye. And also weed control. But what else can cover crops offer us? Drying strategies, something that we've been assessing for 40 years. farmers will dry a cover crop using what? A herbicide. That's the usual system. This is in Pennsylvania. They are producing rolls of rye because they have to close the row quickly because the sunlight starts to activate emergency. Rolando Vicia, check the position of the cutter to check the working width. Now we have 8-meter wide equipment, but the planter is not behind. You have to roll it, to bale it, and then plant. You have spraying equipment, a lot of technology. You have different kinds of bales, different kinds of rolls. This is similar to another equipment. Check these ones. Check the size of these rolls. More than 11 tons each one. These are simple ideas. A simple solution to a big problem. People who want to try this, try that. Something even cheaper, check this. In order to test, you want to test how can cover control with, I don't have the rolling machine, well, but this is an alternative and it's very cheap and it works. What can we roll? Sometimes this is not clear. This is critical, but not any critical. This is a meter 50. I look like Moses now that Moses is so famous on TV because of the soap opera. We have different cultivars here. This is how they grow in Marco Juarez. This is 1 meter, 1 meter tall. You see the wheat 20 centimeters shorter. This is important to make the rolls. Now, what can we roll? Vicia, barley, oat, peas, green peas. But Vicia sativa cannot be rolled. They call me, I have Vicia, I want to roll it. What Vicia is it? Because this, you can drive the rolls 10, 20 times and it will not roll. So it's important to understand what kind of vicia you have. Vicia villosa with these flowers, these individual flowers. The vicia sativa cannot be rolled. Now, when can control the phenological optimum moment to control grasses? In Nantesis, over 80% control. This is Nantesis. When you see these yellow antennas, that's when you can roll. Antesis, why this species? Because if I plant cover crop very late, the antesis comes very close to planting. So we need to understand the cycle of cover crops. A triticale is very long for semi-arid regions. In Vicia villosa, this is the optimum moment to roll it. And the land looks really nice. You were talking about vision yesterday, the vision about the aesthetics. You roll and you see this the following day and you say what? They call me, this is not moving. Come, because this is not dying. He planted, this is in Riviche, in the province of Córdoba. And this is the roll he used. Check the creativity of Argentinian farmers. Now, this is nice. And he didn't use pre-emergent. He's not crazy. Why didn't he use pre-emergent? Because it's 8,500 kilograms. So the big issue here is Amaranthus and Conicia. He doesn't have problems with perennial. That's why the idea he had. But more than 45 quintals, that is water efficiency. And this is a nice plot. This is at soybean harvest, clean, residual weeds. So we tried a small trial planting a green cover soybean in October. You have to plant from up there on stubble. Another soybean planting date on rolled rye. Now we have weeds. We have Amaranthus hybridus on early planting dates. There were no treatments here. We relied on natural dynamics. We used paraquat and check what happened. This is a treatment where we separated hybridus amaranthus. And what happens here? We took the weed out manually just to check the loss on yield. And this is the dynamics of Amaranthus hybridus in this growing year. When I take the weeds out manually, check the change, the replacement. These are the applications: 2 liters of glyphosate, 2 more liters, 4 liters, and nothing. This is soybean planting in red, the rolling. In date number 2, this is the dynamics, natural dynamics, less red in the second planting date. Weeds taken out manually. This is R5. This is rye. These are the applications. The rolling. Soybean planting, 1 application. 61% less active ingredient using rye as cover crop. Pre-planting of rye and in date number 1 and C3. Yields very quickly. Who are here? The stubble, when we did not take the weeds out manually. This variation is due to flooding, to waterlogging. If we check here, these are the cover crops, these are the stubble. Without taking out the weeds from the stubble, and this is on rye, and date number 2, the same. So where is it easier to rescue a plot? That's interesting. Many times pre-emergence, I don't know, they were washed out. Which could be the answer? Where is it easier to rescue a plot? Unless I plant with good density, because rye has to be properly planted consistently. Unless I do that, I will have this result. This is what we are seeing, this weed on stubble, weed growing on cover crops, surface roots, but try to remove this one. It keeps humidity under the cover, so just to think about control. Therefore, sunlight, photosynthetically active on soybean, over stubble, over cover crop. Something else that is interesting, rye residue, most of the cycle of soybean to harvest is intersecting about 80% of the photosynthetic active element.
There may be some other things if we consider annual weeds. That was seen in Marco Juarez. Another test, there's natural dynamics of Amaranthus hybridus. This is on stubble treated only with glyphosate. Metsulfuron was used here, and you can see the displacement. Then we used metolachlor and glyphosate on soybean. This is on rye, burnt with a herbicide only and no other post-emergence application to this soybean. Soybean on rye, rolled rye with metolachlor and glyphosate, only rye, rolled rye, nothing used. We can use a cover crop to control the peak based on competence, and then a pre-emergence to control the other peak. This shows the different applications on stubble with glyphosate, and purple is residual stub. This was an interesting study. 3 seasons, the yield for soybean in Marco Juarez, triticale rolled, herbicide applied, stubble, the capital A, within the season, there's no difference. What's the interesting thing here? We should analyze environmental impact of agrochemical products. EIQ is a way of assessing environmental impact of agrochemical products. There are several methods to do this assessment. We can assess different strategies of weed management because we have different values to contrast. There's a formula which is a bit complicated for EIQ. Red letters refer to the risks of the applicator, black ink, consumer risks, and green refers to ecology risks. Then you get the average, and you can check this. Here it is published. Each commercial product has an EIQ value in blue here. Check the glyphosate, atrazine. Acetic acid is a contact herbicide used at 20% in the US. This EIQ is multiplied for the active ingredient percentage, multiplied by the dose. Then we add the applications, the insecticides, herbicides, and I have a plan for, I have an IEQ for each treatment plan. Stewart has already set thresholds for the EIQ, very low, below 5, low, medium values. You can see in light blue, rolled products, herbicide dried, the stubble. My question is, why does this soybean cost the same as this one? Should it cost the same? But if at a certain market they say, I will buy this type of soy but not that one, that's interesting to analyze for the future. Is this added value? I think so. There are different ways to get to the coal. In Marco Juarez, we have seen unaffected use by means of different strategies. Weeds management. When rolling on the weeds, see the new growth, the farmer could be very worried, but that's not a problem at all. You can see different weeds, amaranthus, nothing used here. Please check the pressure on the seed bank. I can see what is below. Is this comprehensive weed management? Is this managing the bank? If I try to control this so as to reduce the expression, this is in Reviche. Manolo, the farmer, is there with soybean on Vicia, mastritical, that's a stubble. You can see corn on Vicia and corn second season on wheat, which was for the harvest. You can see the year, corn on Vicia without fertilizers. The nitrogen contribution is also visible. He does not use pre-emergence. Can you understand why he does not use pre-emergence? He's rather face problems when sowing, but not the problems his neighbors has. This is Corral de Buco, Indiviche, Santa Regina, Pergamino, Intercarué. With knife on Vicia, without knife. This is Jovita, semi-arid zone. Please check the width of the farmer to create the tool. Finally, this is an interesting story. Management, what we have been proposing, and an interesting situation. They are neighbors. How should we tackle this? This plot, which is rented, causes several problems and send the problems to me, the neighbor. We should take these situations into account. As a technician, you can solve some of them. You have to be multidisciplinary. That's the only way you can work. When you propose something new, there's someone who will say that will not work, that is useless. These people is not like that. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tomás Baigorria, for your talk. We have some minutes for questions and conclusions. You can see on screen some of the questions that you have text. Jorge, please proceed and answer that question. Thank you. There's a question for Fabián Melaben. Why is the oat population lower with nitrogen? Which were the yields for each option? That's an excellent question, because we were trying to find an answer to this question. We believe, we have not tested this to say this was the mechanism, but based on the publications, we believe that when nitrogen is high, germination is inhibited for oat, at least where we were working, which establishes a difference in the size of the crop and the black oat, which has a later emergence. For yields, I don't know them by heart. I have the notes in my computer, and of course they were closely related to the amount of weeds. High nitrogen systems with no weeds had a significant higher yield compared to the low density and nitrogen. We compared them, and I got these results last week, so I do not know the figures by heart. We were checking them against the average for Montana, specifically with values from the area where we were performing this study, and we were close to the media for the area where we were working in Montana. Second question. The practices that you have shown could be used for latifoliated weeds with subterranean reserve organs. These guidelines cannot be applied as herbicides, which are usable for a wide range of environmental conditions. These guidelines should be fine-tuned based on the environment conditions of each plot. Based on my experience, I could say yes, this type of weeds. There are two types of weeds. Annual weeds, we have studied some multiple resistance to glyphosate and ALS. 4 days ago, a farmer called me and told me he had hormone regulator resistance and glyphosate resistance. And in our studies, the studies we have performed can be reproduced regarding subterranean organ species like Cissus marvensis, which is a perennial species. That's a different monster. It's interesting to mention there's a technique available, which is meta-analysis. It's a research on research studies. We collected about 80 years of research studies, 1,200 papers. We looked at the results and we saw how perennial species could be managed. Cissus marvensis, for example, using herbicides and comprehensive management. Interesting is that for herbicides, there were about 400 papers. For comprehensive management, there were like 20 or 30 papers. There are much fewer, but the thing is there were no significant differences between the management you could attain with herbicides compared to comprehensive management. This is not a research we carried out, but it's we gathered the publications from the literature and meta-analyzed them. Question for Tomás: how long after rolling can you plant? If a pre-emergence is going to be used, then you should wait till air out. For rolling, the material is not dried after 8 days as when you use glyphosate, so the material will need some 16, 17 days before planting, even earlier for some countries. In general, you can wait 15 days to start planting. Next question. What is your recommendation, Tomás, for planting biplane on corn? Which date? In Maquena, southern Córdoba, they are using rye, barley. In the US, they are also planting rye and bisia. Highly recommendable is a higher density for planting, because implantation is not the same as for land sowing. A rain after 2-3 days is very important, because the environment of the seed has to be surrounded by humidity to trap the air. If the sow has to be early with rain, rye, barley, bisia. There are some studies proving successful results. Blooming could be a right time for that sowing. Do you believe that this issue can be handled only by the actions taken by individual farmers, or more comprehensive policies are necessary? there's a measure that should be taken. It's not a technical one, but a political measure. We saw that when the plot is rented, there's no comprehensive management at all. So there should be a legal framework to control practices to avoid that type of problems. Considering resistant weed management, we should see what they are using in the medical field. There's a group, physicians, who regulate the use of antibiotics. We can't go to the pharmacy, we shouldn't, and buy an antibiotic and use it because we think it's necessary. Physicians regulate the industry and the consumer, considering pesticides, herbicides. There's no one to regulate the use. So who should be regulating that? There are two strategies that we can define. A vertical one from top to bottom, where the state defining how much herbicide under which modes of actions can be used. That could be conflicting among people. Or maybe we could raise awareness among farmers, and in that case cooperatives should dictate what to do altogether to tackle these problems. A very good example to consider is what happened in the fruit production area in California. Farmers had problems because they couldn't manage their weeds, so they organized under cooperatives to find alternative solutions. There's a book which is Ag Ecology into Action, available for you, that talks about how farmers have formed cooperatives. Regulations can be from top to bottom, from bottom to top, depending on the people. In my opinion, I think these generalized issues cannot be tackled individually, internally, and they require ag policies. We have a clear example. We've been through it, as the ag business is restricted and is not duly oriented because of the wrong policies at the national level. Then you tend to perform certain activities for survival. And in our case, as a country, we have ended up with a single crop, soybean, which is related to a product, to an active ingredient for weed management, meaning glyphosate. The weed resistance process has been accelerated. There's an issue in terms of ag policies. If there's no trend to offer diversity of options in agricultural business, both livestock or any crop, nationally based on regions, it is very difficult for the farmer to tackle a significant, durable, over time solution. I do believe we should support initiatives altogether and effort ourselves to make that, to help those lawmakers and teach them so that they can find the best solution for the agricultural business. Except for the reference framework, we know that every company should try to earn money to get business, and that search for business should be done in the best ways possible. The agriculture, as seen these years, has accelerated these issues because each farmer every year tries to spend the least possible and obtain the best income. And that goes against this overall situation. If we have farmers who are aware of, who are committed to the agricultural issue, the problem can be solved in a better way. Under a general context, coverage crops, as seen in the previous panel and in this panel, are very helpful. I am certain about that, to control resistant weeds, but also a wider spectrum of active ingredients should be used. And in the case of cover crops, besides from using the space, consider that a plot which has no interesting crops is like an empty space, and that's an invitation for weeds to come and thrive. If you have resources, I want to make the comment, as Bill said, in Australia, that they have a very intense drought. They need to recapture water for a cash crop. That is not the case here, so that's a parenthesis, except for some northeast areas where livestock is much more frequent than crops. Based on our soil, we can use cover crops to maintain the soil occupied most of the time, trying to get a benefit like nitrogen fixation, carbon sequestration. I mean, to get those benefits during the windows in which our cash crops are not being planted. Well, we should do that. There are scientific evidence supporting this. I have particularly implemented the Visa villosum crop, which is highly competitive and aggressive to control weeds, and it allows for water consumption in depths. We have an excess of water almost all over the country, which has not only affected harvesting but has refrained us from obtaining good quality crops. Another benefit is nitrogen fixation. We are not going to harvest anything particularly, but we are gathering nitrogen, biological nitrogen, for further crops, which reduces the explosion window not only for weeds but for the subsequent crops. Therefore, at a definite time, we can control the development of the weeds, which are not going to affect our cash crops. There's a huge challenge for us as farmers, Argentinians, and technicians to tackle this issue of resistant weeds in our national context and within a framework of rotation and comprehensive management, including the wider management as ag producers trying to maximize economic income in the long term, not using only one crop. I think that the panel is ended. We have finished the time. Thank you.